Sophie Cunningham doesn't hold back. Caitlin Clark doesn't either. So when both of them stood in front of cameras after Indiana's brutal 113-96 loss to Atlanta and started talking about their coach, everyone in that press room went quiet. What they said wasn't subtle, and Stephanie White was standing right there. Before we get to that moment, you need to see the full game because what happened on that court for 40 minutes is the only way to understand why Clark and Cunningham finally snapped. Clark came out on fire. 13 points in the first quarter, 5 of 6 from the field, 3 threes, and she was making it look easy in a way that should terrify every other team in this league. Indiana put up 39 points in that first quarter alone, which is a season high.
Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark nearly fights every single game at this point. You will never see this on any level of basketball. But let's watch this. Like look, she's rolling her eyes already. Look at this. She's tired of you, Stephanie. I'm sorry, but she's tired. This is not good. At any point, this is not good. She's rolling her eyes, looking up at the scoreboard. Stephanie, you think you know what you're talking about, and you don't have a single.
And at one point, they were up 11 on Atlanta, and the Dream had no answer for any of it. What made it scary wasn't just the scoring. Every time Atlanta tried to throw a double team at Clark, she'd already seen it coming and the ball was gone, finding a cutter, hitting a teammate in rhythm, pushing the pace before Atlanta's defense could reset. She finished through contact, ran the break, and distributed the ball like someone who was completely locked in and playing with zero hesitation.
The Indiana Fever were just decimated by the Atlanta Dream. Absolutely decimated. After Caitlin Clark with a historic first quarter. A historic first quarter. She dropped 13 points in the first quarter. I mean, just look at this. 13 points in the first quarter. 5 for 6 from the field. 3 for 4 from the three-point. She's the GOAT.
Indiana looked like a team that could beat anybody in the WNBA that night. And it was entirely because Clark was controlling the game from the jump. Atlanta didn't figure out a way to stop her. Nobody on their coaching staff drew something up that slowed Clark down or changed what Indiana was doing offensively. So, Atlanta kept getting torched and the Fever kept building the lead. And the first quarter ended with Indiana looking like the better team by a wide margin.
This is her. She was smiling at the end of the first quarter. You know what I'm saying? Happy as hell, hitting threes. Look at the defenders' faces looking like they was on the verge of crying, on the verge of tears. Terrified of this girl. Terrified that she was on pace to drop 52 points tonight, chat. 52 points. 13 points a quarter. And mind you, I don't even think she was done by that point. But this is Caitlin Clark, man. This is who Stephanie White wants to continuously take away from the.
Clark already had 19 points and 5 assists by the time the third quarter hit with only 2 turnovers. And she was still playing with that same aggression and efficiency she'd had from the opening tip. And then Stephanie White pulled her. At the 8:41 mark of the third quarter, right after a Monique Billings foul on Jordan Canada, White yanked Clark to the sideline and got into an animated exchange with her. The Fever were up 5 at that point. Clark was cooking. There was no injury, no foul trouble, no obvious tactical reason to take your best player off the floor in the middle of a close game where she'd been the only reason Indiana was ahead. But off she came, and what followed was a 13-0 Atlanta run that basically ended the game before the fourth quarter even started. Indiana got outscored 28-5 in the third quarter total, and the lead they'd built evaporated completely. The lineup White ran after pulling Clark didn't space the floor better or create mismatches. Atlanta's in.
And then look right here, Caitlin's arguing with the coaching staff. She's trying to talk. I see she was talking to Austin Kelly right here once again. So instead of going straight to Stephanie White, and what is Stephanie White doing? Looking away from Caitlin Clark. Now, habits told me one thing, is that whenever Stephanie White looks away from Caitlin Clark while Caitlin is looking at Stephanie or approaching Stephanie, that usually means that Stephanie White was wrong.
The three-guard look White kept going back to just created confusion, and Atlanta took full advantage of every second of it. White has talked about her 3A's philosophy, which is awareness, anticipation, and defense. And look, that sounds fine when you're talking to reporters, but that philosophy is designed for a grinded-out, defensive-minded team, not for a roster that has Caitlin Clark, a player who was literally on pace to score over 50 points if you just extrapolate her first quarter efficiency across a full game. You don't build your coaching system around limiting ball movement and managing minutes when your point guard is dropping 13 points in 12 minutes and making every right read on the floor. Clark sat on that bench and watched Atlanta extend the lead while White ran lineups that had no business being out there in a game Indiana still had a chance to win. Her frustration wasn't hidden. You could see it.
Caitlin Clark is looking at Stephanie White to say, "I told you so." Stephanie White can never make eye contact with her. Caitlin Clark is always voicing her opinions to Austin Kelly because Stephanie White won't hear a damn thing.
Ended the night with 26 points and 7 assists, which for most players would be a career night. And she got there despite the substitution pattern, not because of it. 29 fouls. Indiana committed 29 fouls in this game. And Atlanta shot 31 free throws to Indiana's 21. So that's 10 extra free throw attempts the Dream got just because the refs decided to call the game one way and stick with it all night. That's not a blowout in the making. That's a blowout being constructed one whistle at a time. Let's talk about Aaliyah Boston first because her foul trouble didn't just hurt Indiana on defense. It gutted their entire game plan. Boston picked up her third foul before halftime, which already had her playing cautious and hesitant in the second quarter when she should have been physical and aggressive.
They called foul after foul after foul after foul when nobody was getting touched. But when Caitlin Clark did that same drive to the hole and was getting hit all game, they didn't call that foul. When Kelsey Mitchell goes up for a layup and is getting pulled from behind, her hand hits Ryan Howard in the face and she gets a technical. But when Angel Reese goes up for a layup and elbows somebody for the third time in 2 games, no upgrade on Angel Reese.
Fouled out with 5 fouls, playing only 22 minutes total. And the moment she picked up that 5th foul late in the third quarter, the game got out of hand almost immediately. Boston is the one Fever player with the size and strength to battle Atlanta's interior. So, when she's sitting on the bench watching, Atlanta's forwards and centers start eating because nobody left on the floor for Indiana can stop them. What made it worse is that Stephanie White refused to challenge Boston's 5th foul, even though the contact on the play looked marginal and incidental to pretty much everyone watching. You've got your best interior defender on 5 fouls in a game where Atlanta is winning the paint, and you won't even burn a challenge to try to get that call overturned. That's not conservative coaching. That's giving up. And it handed Atlanta a free path to the basket for most of the fourth quarter. Now, the pattern the refs ran all night went like this. Clark drives hard to the rim, absorbs contact from an Atlanta defender, and the whistle stays quiet. Atlanta.
Ooh. I mean, there's a push, but that feels like the kind of contact that happens.
Completely incidental.
It happens.
Held and pushed Indiana's shooters off their spots without a single call going Indiana's way. But the second any Fever player got physical on defense, the refs were right there with the whistle ready. Angel Reese played the most physical game she's played all season, throwing her body around on the glass and in the post, and the refs rewarded her for it on one end while ignoring the exact same behavior on the other end when Indiana tried to match it. That's 53 combined fouls called in this game. And the split between the two teams wasn't close. Indiana's players spent the second half terrified of picking up another foul because they all knew one more whistle could send them to the bench. And that fear changes how you defend, how aggressive you are on the ball, how willing you are to take a charge or fight through a screen. Atlanta played with no such fear because the officials gave them room to be physical without consequences. So, you end up with
Watch this film, and I'm going to show you how the double standard is crazy. But both players hit Caitlin Clark's arms. She comes through and still makes the bucket. And then Angel Reese has something to say. Always. Like, she annoys me. Caitlin Clark hits a 3. I think that's the most open she's been the entire season. And look at, here's a moving screen. Do you see how she moves her leg out to get that screen on Caitlin Clark? That's an illegal screen.
Fourth quarter where Indiana couldn't generate any defensive pressure at all, where Boston was stuck on the bench because White didn't fight for her, and where the Fever's best lineup never actually shared the floor together, partly because of White's substitution decisions and partly because of the foul situation the refs manufactured across 40 minutes. The broadcast framed it as a competitive loss that just got away from Indiana late.
This is crazy. That was the first one I was just like, how's that a foul? Because watch this, Caitlin Clark's being held. 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds. Remember that, because you're about to see a whole bunch of ghost fouls. There's another one, Sophie Cunningham. Every single play, we're trying to build a lead, but we can't because the refs stop the game every single second when nobody's...
Indiana shot 21 free throws. Atlanta shot 31. Clark scored 26 points without the refs ever giving her the line, driving into defenders and absorbing contact that would have sent any Atlanta guard to the stripe without a second thought. Even with all the ref problems and White pulling Clark at the worst possible moment, Indiana still found ways to hurt itself. And some of that damage came from players who should have been the solution. Let's talk about Aaliyah Boston. She missed layups in this game. Not tough contested finishes where a defender got a hand in her face. Not off-balance attempts from weird angles, just open looks inside 5 feet that she's got to convert if Indiana wants to stay competitive.
She fell down 5 times. Look at that, she wasn't even touched. The same one that got us last game for falling down every single play.
We're talking about point-blank misses that turned into Atlanta fast breaks. Possessions where Clark or Mitchell worked hard to get Boston a clean look in the paint and she just didn't finish. In a game Indiana lost by 17, those missed layups aren't small. They're the difference between staying in the fight and getting buried. Boston is genuinely one of the better interior players in this league when she's playing with confidence and rhythm. So, the fact that she kept missing those close looks tells you something's off with how she's being used, because it's not a talent issue. Kelsey Mitchell scored 16 points total, but the way she got there and what she did in the second half are two completely different stories. In the second quarter alone, Mitchell launched 7 shots, more than any other Fever player in a single quarter all game. And a lot of those came in moments where Clark was open and already reading the defense perfectly. The second half was worse. Mitchell went 0 for 3 from the field across 16 second-half minutes and scored 0 points. And the bigger problem wasn't the missed shots, it was the dribbling. She'd bring the ball up, dribble, 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 and by the time she made a decision, the play was dead, and Clark was standing on the wing watching it happen. When your team's offense runs through Clark, you don't get to freelance for a full half and pretend you're running the offense.
Screen from Hines Allen. Clark draws 2. Finds the cutter. It's Boston center the lane for the soft finish and the foul.
Nobody told Mitchell that, and that's a coaching failure as much as it's a player problem. Lexi Hull and Monique Billings both signed real money contracts this offseason, so their performance on June 20th is worth talking about plainly. Hull went through an offensive drought that covered pretty much the entire game, never getting anything going, never really threatening Atlanta's defense in any way. Billings picked up fouls early and spent critical minutes on the bench without making any kind of impact before she sat for good. 2 players with big contracts combined for almost nothing. And Indiana needed both of them. Now off the bench, 3 players actually showed up. Sophie Cunningham finished with 13 points and hit 3 of her 8 3-point attempts. And more than the numbers, she brought physical energy that the starting lineup just wasn't generating. She competed hard on every possession, got after it defensively, and gave Indiana something real to work with. Nalissa Smith gave the Fever interior presence and finished around the basket in ways Boston couldn't manage while fighting foul trouble. Raven
Mitchell with a beautiful shot and drain. Mitchell and the way she can dance with the basketball, that time behind her back, pow pow.
Johnson pushed pace, made smart decisions, and kept Indiana from falling apart completely during the stretches when the starters were struggling. So, White's starting rotation underperformed, and the players actually sparking Indiana came off the bench with something to prove. Cunningham alone outscored Hull and Billings combined while playing fewer minutes than either of them. That's a rotation problem that White keeps refusing to fix. And the players who are most fed up with it aren't hiding that frustration. The post-game press conference started the way they usually do after a bad loss. Reporters settling in. Cameras adjusting, the kind of quiet in the room where everyone's waiting to see who says what. Stephanie White sat at the table. Clark sat right next to her, and you could read the frustration on Clark's face before she opened her mouth. One broadcaster watching the feed described her as looking extremely frustrated and pissed, and another said she was rolling her eyes already, looking at the scoreboard like she was still doing the math on everything that went wrong. Clark didn't blow up. She kept it professional. But the words she chose told the whole story. She talked about ball security. Said the team did some really good things in the first half by playing in transition, spraying the ball, finding open people.
Billings gives it up. Hall flags it down. Clark coming back to it. Circling, dishing, Hines Allen hitting on the jumper.
Then she described the second half this way: "It's really hard to do that when all we do is foul and they score. Like we didn't play in transition at all in the second half because of that." That's Clark sitting next to her coach, telling anyone paying attention that Indiana's second half identity, the one White chose, killed everything that was working. She didn't name White. She didn't need to. Every person in that room understood that the shift away from transition basketball wasn't something Clark did. It was something that got done to her offense, and she was done pretending otherwise. Cunningham backed her up, and Cunningham doesn't cushion things the way Clark does. Where Clark stayed measured and chose her words carefully, Cunningham spoke directly about competing, about what winning actually requires from this team, about the approach on the floor. The room got quieter when Cunningham talked because she wasn't being diplomatic, and everyone could feel it. She's been one of the most physically competitive players on Indiana's roster all season, playing with an edge that White's rotation and system haven't always rewarded, and the postgame was her saying out loud what her play on the court had already been saying for weeks. White sat there. The cameras caught all of it. What White said in response landed flat next to what Clark and Cunningham had just put on the table, and the gap between the two conversations told you more than any quote could.
Look, we all know that this was weird. This is weird. I'll say this, that this was like one of these moments where it's like Caitlin looked kind of done. Caitlin just looked done with whatever Steph White said to her. This is like a, what the fuck? No way. We all know that.
People who've watched this team all season weren't surprised by any of it. They'd already seen Clark's frustration building on the sideline during those third-quarter substitutions. Already seen Cunningham bring fire and competitiveness that the system keeps failing to use properly. Already watched Indiana run lineups that made no sense in close games while their best player watched from the bench. The post-game didn't reveal anything new. It just confirmed it on camera with everyone watching. Clark's 26 points and 7 assists against Atlanta weren't a one-time thing she stumbled into. That's her floor. What she produces when the offense runs the way she described in the first half, fast, spread out, finding open players before the defense can recover.
What we did well in the first half was play in transition, spray, find open people. And then it's really hard to do that when all we do is foul and they score. Like, we didn't play in transition at all in the second half because of that.
White pulled her during a scoring run, and Indiana got outscored 28-5 in the third quarter. That's not coincidence, and it's not bad luck. It's what happens when you yank the engine out of a car that's running well. The 2026 window for this team is real. Clark is playing at a level where an MVP run isn't a fantasy, and the Fever have enough talent around her to compete for something serious. But every game where White treats Clark's strengths as things to manage rather than build around is a game Indiana hands to the other team before the opening tip. Clark put up 26 points and 7 assists in a loss, got yanked during a scoring run, watched the refs gift Atlanta 31 free throws, and then sat next to her coach on camera while she and Cunningham said exactly what they thought. White acknowledged after the game that Indiana's foul problems come from players being late and out of position, which is a coaching problem she's describing out loud without seeming to realize it.